Welcome to The Story Apothecary, a podcast filled with medicinal and healing stories. My name is Nana Timova, and I'm a storyteller and a pharmacist, and stories are medicines which I dispense. In this podcast, you will find my prescriptions of stories for the body, mind, heart and soul. So I invite you to join me as we enter the healing world of stories together. Hello to all my listeners, the new ones and the old ones. You're very welcome into the Story Apothecary, where I will be prescribing another story prescription for you. Welcome to the autumn almost. We are now in September. It is the time of mushrooms, the time of golden leaves upon the forest floor, the time of change. It's one of my favourite seasons after the spring. I really like September. It's still warm, but really you could see the earth abundant with nuts and fruit, the apple and the grapes and the blackberries swelling on the bushes. It's a wonderful time. This week's story comes from Russia. And it's one that my dear patrons voted for. And it's called Vasilisa the Priest's Daughter. But this isn't Vasilisa as in Vasilisa the Beautiful, Vasilisa the Wise, or Vasilisa the Brave. It is a different Vasilisa. And it's a wonderful story. Really lovely. I really like it. And speaking of other stories from Eastern Europe, you may remember I am telling some stories of Baba Yaga alongside In Feathers, the musician who will be playing beautiful music. And that's happening on the 31st of October. Tickets are selling steadily, so if you would like to join us, please grab one. Now, back to today's story. The story of today I really liked because it speaks of a girl who likes to live her life as a boy. Now this story is from many centuries ago when you were a girl and living as a boy. It wasn't that possible as it is today. Certainly in some aspects it would have been dangerous, especially if you're found out. In some aspects, you may have been shunned from part of your community. And it's also very challenging for a certain period of time. Although I believe that if you go back far enough, more than a few hundred years, maybe a few thousand years, then I think that is fluidity of genders was a lot more possible then, a lot more accepted. And it seemed that it was like that, and then kind of went backwards, and now we're coming into life of possibilities again. And so I don't know what time period this story comes from. It might be from the 1600s, 1400s. I am not sure. But there are other stories similar to it. There's one called The Three Crowns by Giambattista Basile in 1634, Italy. It's thought to have been written down, composed. So it's a literary fairy tale as opposed to one passed down from mouth to mouth. There's another beautiful Russian tale called The Lute Player, where a king's wife disguises as a man in order to save her husband. And there's another one called Constanza in Constanzo, which is also Italian. And that was written down in the 1500s. So it might give us an idea of what time period that this particular story may be set in. So here we go. Vasilisa, the priest's daughter. Long, long ago, before the time of your grandmother, and her grandmother, and her grandmother, in a certain land, in a certain kingdom, there lived a young woman called Vasilisa Vasilyevna, and she was the priest's daughter. But she wasn't known as Vasilisa Vasilyevna by most, for she wore man's clothes. She rode on horseback, something which women were not allowed to do, was very good shot with a rifle, and did everything in quite, they thought, an unmaidenly way, which perhaps means that she was freer in the way that she talked, freer in the way that she walked, freer in the way that she thought. And so very few people thought that she was indeed a girl. Most people thought she was a man. And his name was Vasily Vasilyevich. And it was so unusual to think that Vasilisa Vasilyevna was a woman because she was fond of a tipple or two. And this was out of a question for a maiden. One day, the king went to hunt game, and he met Vasilisa Vasilyevna. She was riding horseback in man's clothes and was also hunting. And the way that she strode that horse with an upright back, poised, holding the reins strongly yet elegantly, she had perfect control of the horse. With gallant clothes and a shot better than any hunter in his land, in his kingdom. "Who is that young man?" asked the king of one of his servants. "Oh, your majesty, that is not a man. It is a girl. I know for certain that she is the daughter of the priest Vasily, and that her name is Vasilisa Vasilyevna." Well, that surprised the king, made him curious. He wanted to meet that person. He wanted to know, he wanted to find out, and he wanted to be the one to do it. Whether he wanted to shame her, the story does not say. Whether he wanted to find out because he was curious, the story does not say. Whether he wanted to marry her, the story does not say. But what we know is that he went back into the kingdom and he wrote a letter to the priest asking that the priest permit his son, Vasily Vasilyevich, to come and visit the king and eat at the king's table, share food with him, share wine with him. And he knew that the priest would not refuse. Meanwhile, the king himself, he went to a little old back hedge witch, a seer, a hag, some may call her, many names, a wise woman, a woman that knows the secrets that lie between this world and the next. And she can use them for good, she can use them for bad. And so the king paid a few good gold coins to the old wise woman. And he began to question her. How could he find out whether the silly Vasilyevich was really a girl? And so, the old wise woman, what her intention was, we do not know. But perhaps she knew that Vasilisa, who was also known as Vasily, was wise and clever and had a heart as well as a brain, and so this is what she said. On the day that Vasily comes to visit your castle, in your chamber, on the right-hand side, hang up an embroidery frame. On the left side, a gun. If she is really Vasilisa Vasilyevna, she will first notice the embroidery frame. But if she's Vasily Vasilyevich, he will notice the gun. And the king followed the wise woman's advice and ordered his servants to hang up an embroidery frame on the right and a gun on the left of his chamber. During this time, the letter, written by the king's hand, travelled. It travelled and reached Father Vasily the priest, and he showed it to his daughter. She went to the stable, saddled a grey horse with a grey mane, and went straight to the king's palace. The king received her. She politely said her prayers and graciously greeted the king and entered the palace with him. They sat together at the table, talking, laughing, and began to drink the heady drinks and eat meats and pancakes and birds stuffed with rice and all manner of things. After dinner, Vasilisa Vasilyevna walked with the king through the palace chambers. She looked. She saw the embroidery frame and she began to reproach the king. "What kind of junk do you have here, king? In my father's house, there is no trace of such womanish fiddle-faddle. But the king's place, womanish fiddle-faddle hangs in the chambers." She was angry. She left the chambers, and then she rode home. And the king scratched his head, not really knowing if she was a boy or if she was a girl. And so a couple of days later, no more, he was a very impatient king. Kings often are. They tend to do whatever they want. The king sent again the letter to priest Vasily, asking him again to send his son Vasily Vasilyevich to the palace. And as soon as Vasilisa Vasilievna heard about this, she went to the stable, saddled a grey horse with a grey mane, and rode graciously straight to the king's palace. The king once again received her with open arms. She graciously greeted him and entered into the palace. Now, during those couple of days, the king again had gone to the wise old woman in the woods, and she had told him to cook supper and to have it stuffed with pearls. That will be, of course, no problem for the king. He had sent for pearls to be brought, and he gave them to the cook, who knew not to ask too many questions, and put them in the food. The little old woman in the woods had told him if the youth was really Vasilisa Vasilievna, that she would put the pearls in a pile, admire them, and play with them, and if he was Vasily Vasilyevich, he would throw them under the table. Well, Vasilisa came, shown to the dining room, a long, long table filled with dishes of all kinds, the scent of dill and parsley, tarragon and garlic. The richness filled the air, a marriage of sense and delight for your nostrils. And they sat down. It was supper. The servants came and the servants served. The king sat and placed Vasilisa on his right side, and they began to drink heady drinks and eat rich foods once again. Kasha was served after all the other dishes, a type of porridge, but flavoured opulently and delicately. As soon as Vasilisa Vasilievna took a spoonful of the kasha, she discovered a pearl, and she flung it under the table together with the kasha and began to reproach the king. "What kind of trash do they put in your kasha?" she said. "In my father's house there is no trash of such womanish fiddle-faddle. Yet in your house, king, there is womanish fiddle-faddle to put in the food." And then again, she made excuses, politely said farewell, and left and rode home on her grey horse. And once again, the king had not found out whether she was really a girl, and he really badly wanted to know. He had a bit of a wobble that night, called in his viziers, his top advisors, and behaved more like a toddler than a king, but they told him to have patience. And he swallowed his pride and took a dose of patience. And 2 days later again, a third letter was written and sent. And on the advice of the old woman in the woods, the king ordered his bath to be heated. For the old woman had told him that if he really wanted to find out, was it Vasily, was it Vasilisa, the bathhouse would have to be heated. If it was really Vasilisa, then she would refuse to go to the bath. And if it was Vasily, then Vasily would accept. For how can a woman bathe with the king? Impossible. And so the bath was heated. A good trick. The letter came. Vasilisa went to the stable, saddled her grey horse with a grey mane, and galloped straight to the king's palace. The king went to receive her on the front porch, a glint in his eyes, a coy smile just hanging on one side of his mouth. She greeted him civilly, entered the palace on a red velvet rug. Having come in, she sat at the table, invited by the king once more, and began to drink heady drinks and eat rich food. After dinner, the king, with an impatient, high-pitched tone, trying to hide his excitement, a slight bitterness in his voice, a plan emerging in his eyes. "Would it not please you," he said, "dear Vasily Vasilyevich, to come with me to the bath-house?" "Oh, certainly, your Majesty," said Vasilisa Vasilyevna. "I have had not a bath for a long time, and I would very much like to steam myself." And so they went together into the bath-house. While the king undressed in the ante-room, she took her bath and left. And so the king did not catch her in a bath either, and that was a very good thing. Having left the house, Vasilisa Vasilyevna wrote a note to the king and ordered the servants to hand it to him when he came out of the bath-house. And the note said this: "Ah, king, raven that you are, you could not surprise a falcon in the garden. For I am not Vasilisa Vasilyevich, but Vasilisa Vasilyevna." And so the king got nothing for all his trouble. For Vasilisa Vasilyevna was a clever woman with a strong will, and she carried on dressing the way she wanted, carried on riding her horse and hunting in the forests, and carried on drinking heady drinks and speaking her mind. And so she carried on living in peace. The king could not do anything, for she had outsmarted him, outwitted him. His pride could not admit that, but he wasn't a bad man. Impatient, yes, but fair. And so Vasilisa Vasilyevna, known as Vasily Vasilyevich, carried on drinking and eating and dressing and hunting however they pleased the rest of her life. I hope you enjoyed this tale. I love learning it and I love telling it. I did some work with the story beforehand, as I always do, asking the story's various questions, walking with the story, taking the story out for a walk, out for a wander. As we wander together, I wonder at the story. There's endless work that can be done with a single story for weeks, months, sometimes years. With a monthly podcast, I cannot spend months with a story, but I try and give it as much time and respect and presence and thought and heart as I can. And I really like this particular story. I like the ending. I like that she was allowed to be free, that they were allowed to be free. I love how they outwitted the king. For really, what would have happened if the king had found out that Vasily was indeed Vasilisa in the bathhouse? No good can come of that. Not at that time. Vasilisa could not have let that happen. Otherwise, she would have gone out a different way to the way she had come in. We need more stories like this one, I think. They do exist, they're out there. They're old. They show us a different way of thinking, of being, of living. Too many stories are too black and white. A princess should behave like this, and a prince should behave like that. Many stories like this one, who teach us there is a different way to live. Outside the enclosed spaces of gender stereotypes, beyond those, there is a little bit more room to breathe, to be free. And stories, some stories, those that have been told well, those that have not been changed by the church or certain people in power, those stories can teach us the way of freedom, teach us the way of fluidity, teach us the way of possibilities, teach us the way to outsmart, outthink, outfeel the authorities in a way that serves not only that person, but the community, that paves the way for more possibilities and more freedom. Stories can show us the way. So with that, I will wish you a wonderful rest of the month. If you enjoy these stories, then do consider supporting me financially via Patreon so that I can keep producing this podcast. There you will be able to get a monthly folklore calendar, Baba Yaga's calendar, some early releases of the podcast, be able to vote for the next episode, and much more. Thank you to all my patrons for their support for the last year, and thank you to Tina, who is my latest patron. The music in this podcast is composed, written, performed and recorded by In Feathers. Thank you to In Feathers for all the beautiful music here. Thank you for joining me into the Story Apothecary. Have a great month. Goodbye. Thank you for joining me in the Story Apothecary for healing and medicinal stories. I hope we'll meet again. Until next time.